Welcome to Unit 3. This video is an introduction to sampling and some important vocabulary that we're going to be using throughout the unit. In this video, we're going to talk about populations and samples, and we're also going to discuss good methods of sampling and bad methods of sampling. During the 2016 presidential elections, many eyes were on Virginia because it was considered a swing state. A swing state is when the proportion of supporters for the two major parties, the Republicans and the Democrats, are almost the same. During the days leading up to the 2016 election, many polls were conducted to predict the winner of the presidential race in Virginia. There were 5,529,742 registered voters in Virginia in 2016. If it was possible to collect information from all of the registered voters, then the result would be called a census. But let's be realistic. It would be practically impossible to survey every registered voter and see who they plan to vote for. So instead, samples of voters were surveyed, and the statisticians used those numbers to make predictions about the entire state. So pollsters like Quinnipiac and Gallup took many sample surveys leading up to the election. The values you see below are predictions based off of the people they surveyed. So the population is the entire group of individuals about which we want the information. Most of the time, it's impossible to get information about every individual in the population, so instead we take a sample. The sample is the part of the population from which we actually collect information. We take this information and we draw conclusions about the entire population. So in this example, our population would be registered Virginia voters. We talked about that it's impossible to probably survey all 5 million plus, so instead we'll take a smaller group of individuals who are registered to vote and we'll ask them who they're going to vote for. This is called a sample survey. It's a study that obtains information from a subgroup of the population in order to estimate something about the population. So the sample is the actual group we gather information from. The process of gathering information is called a sample survey. So choosing a sample that's representative of all Virginia registered voters is not easy. So let's look at the bad types of sampling methods first. Let's say, for example, one of these polls was conducted by the radio station Northern Virginia 99.5 FM. They asked listeners to text into the radio station the person they're going to vote for. The results are Clinton with 48%, Trump with 39%, and Alex Ovechkin with 13%. This type of sampling method is called a voluntary response sample. This allows people to select themselves as a sample rather than you. Those who end up texting in are probably feeling pretty strongly one way or the other. So those who select themselves feel most strongly about the issue and therefore are more likely to text in or volunteer their response. Other examples of voluntary response sampling. If I choose volunteers in my class to receive candy, all those call-in opinion polls like American Idol, Dancing with the Stars, America's Got Talent, only the people who feel really strongly about it are going to call in and voice their opinion. So why is this a bad sampling method? The sample is bad because it has something called bias. Bias is when the design of a statistical study systematically favors certain outcomes. Why is this a bad sample? This is biased because only people interested are going to text in. Multiple votes by the same person does not make a valid sample. And it's not representative of the entire population. Something you really want to make a note about. At any point during your AP exam, if they ask you about the bias in a situation, you have to make sure you talk about whether there was an overestimate or an underestimate of what you would actually expect to happen with the whole. So for example, maybe in this example with the call-in to the radio station, you might have an overestimate of Clinton supporters because maybe more Clinton supporters felt strongly about texting in their response. So there would be an overestimate of Clinton supporters compared to what the actual percentage is for the entire state of Virginia. Example 2, a poll conducted by Gallup had people waiting outside of local supermarkets in Roanoke, Virginia, and surveyed the first 50 people that leave the supermarket. The results were Clinton 22%, Trump 71%, undecided 7%. This type of sampling is called a convenience sample. The selection of whichever individuals are easiest to reach, and the interviewer selects whom they want to respond. Other examples of convenience sample would be if I were in class and I only chose the students at table 1 because they're the easiest to talk to because I'm the closest to them. So choosing table 1 does not give everyone else an equal chance of being selected. The people at the mall that ask questions as you're walking by, that would be convenience samples. Mall interviewers who ask only people shopping at the mall are asking the people who are easiest to reach for them. So why is this a bad sample? This is biased because the researcher may be unknowingly using favoritism to select the sample, and this could cause an over- or underrepresentation of a group within the population. So in this particular situation, Roanoke is a historically Republican supporting area of Virginia. Notice how it is in the red section of the map. If you're only going to ask people from a Roanoke supermarket because they're the easiest to reach, that means you're going to get an overestimate of Trump supporters compared to the state as a whole. So there's the bias. The bias is that there's an overestimate of Trump supporters because the location at which you chose is not representative of the entire state of Virginia. So let's talk about a good sampling method. Every person registered to vote in Virginia was assigned a number, and 100 numbers were pulled out of a hat. These 100 people were called and surveyed. The results were Clinton 49%, Trump 48%, undecided 3%. This type of sampling is called a simple random sample, selecting a sample in a way that every individual has an equal chance to be chosen. Each individual is selected and chosen in the same way. Examples, you want to decide who's randomly going to be selected to a treatment, you could flip a coin. There's a 50-50 chance of heads, tails, there's no bias in one direction. If you assign each student in the class a number from 1 to 6 and you roll a dice, if you get a 5, then all the students who are labeled as 5 would be selected. Everyone has an equal chance of being selected. Why is this a good sample? One, it uses chance, so it's impersonal. There's no favoritism by the sampler, and there's no self-selection by the respondents. This is not biased because all individuals have an equal chance to be chosen.